hello, everybody, and happy Friday to you. It is such a treat to be ending the week with all of you. I really appreciate all of you for tuning in. This is such a busy week. And let's start with the market. Let's talk about what happened in the market. The Dow closed up 114 points. NASDAQ closed up 157 points. Gold taps and hits $2,000 for the first time. And as many of you know, Apple actually split shares and also continues to do very well. But today is not just about the market. Today is a very special day, a day I've been looking forward to because I am so excited to introduce and of course welcome my dear friend Darla Mercado from CNBC. Many of you read her writing. Darla, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Winnie. This is great.
And it's so fun because usually when I actually get to spend some time with Darla, it's actually when I'm on the East Coast and I'm usually flying to the East Coast, and I get a chance to meet with her and her crew, and we're talking about all their things personal finance. So this is definitely a treat. And as many of you know, CNBC, I am on the CNBC Financial Advisor Council, and I do in many ways feel like CNBC, they are like my family and my friends. So Darla, thank you so much for joining us. We have so much to talk about, Darla. It's been a busy week, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. A busy one, an exciting one, a terrifying one, all at the same time. So I guess we could start there.
I know that. I think that's so true. I think for many Americans, and I've talked to clients, right? And I talked to the public, and I think everybody is very concerned. And it's actually so nice that you're joining us today because today's July 31st. And as you and I both know, today, and many of you are watching and know that today is the deadline of the last day that Americans are getting that unemployment enhancement benefit for those many millions of Americans who are currently on unemployment. You know, Darla, I've definitely seen your writing on this, and I know you've been covering this for some time. And I know you and I were both hoping that there was some direction, right? That we would know whether or not it got extended, if it got reduced, what that reduced amount would be. What are you hearing at CNBC with your friends? I mean, is everyone sort of on pins and needles and waiting for information as well?
That's exactly where we stand right now. So at the moment, we're just sort of following along to what Congress is doing. We know that we have the HEALS Act, certainly the HEROES Act as well from the House, which was passed back in May. But as it stands, neither of those bills seems to be moving forward just yet. And we know that there's still a fair bit of debate before anything moves forward. And in the meantime, you've got a whole lot of folks who are depending on that $600 additional boost from the federal government, who at this point aren't sure what's going to happen next. So we're just watching.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's key. I think a lot of us are sort of waiting and hoping that we get more information, obviously sooner rather than later. And we know it's a big decision. It's unfortunate. We know that the Democrats had already initiated what passed the House back in May, and yet we're now all the way. This weekend will be in August. You kind of think like maybe they should have figured this out by now, but we're not. You and I are not there, so we're not the ones who are making that decision. We can only hope that we get some sort of clarity sooner rather than later. So Darla, let's talk about that. I mean, I will share with you that many people that we've been talking about social media feel like, at least, that there's sort of two camps. Number one camp is that we definitely need that $600, because if we don't have that $600, then it means that I might not be able to pay rent, right? I might not pay my mortgage. I might not buy like those things. And then the other camp that you and I have been seeing is they've been saying, well, if you provide that $600, it becomes a crutch. Like 2/3 of the people who are unemployed, I read that on CNBC, 2/3 of the people who are unemployed, that the $600 makes it so that they actually make more on unemployment than when they were working. So I don't know. I just think it's a hard one. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I certainly I'm not going to go and opine on the politics of it.
Right.
I certainly would say that just based on the conversations I've had, I mean, you've got a number of people who are really depending on that money, for the bare essentials at this point. And certainly some folks that I've spoken to have said, the big upside of providing that stream of income to these folks is that they put the money right back into the economy. So certainly if you're a low income individual, you're not necessarily saving that money, rather you're using it to pay off debt. You're putting the money back into the economy. So in that sense, there's a twofold benefit. You're helping people get by, and then at the same time, you're stimulating consumer activity. So I definitely understand that.
I understand that too, and I think we all understand that a lot of people are suffering, and nobody really wanted to be in this situation. Certainly, the pandemic was unexpected, but we just got to get through this together and make the best of it. One thing that we saw with the HEALS Act is there's been a proposal. There's a lot of things that are being proposed. I think one of the things that proposal was $200 a week. Up until October 5th. And then after that, sort of covering 70% of unemployment. And I don't know if you saw this, Darla. It's really interesting. I read this here in the state of California. There are some lawmakers trying to get ready just in case the $500, $600 goes away, that they might be able to try from the state to try to, come back with that. I'm just curious. I didn't actually read this. So I'm just curious. I'm guessing that if California does do this, other states might try to do this as well. Some states might have the ability and others might not have to. But have you heard anything about this?
I have with respect to California, but certainly haven't heard of any other states looking to do something similar. It is an interesting position for those states, though, because just given how long this pandemic has gone on, the large numbers of people who've been on unemployment, and then the fact that, folks aren't getting out there, you've got businesses closing. There's been this big decline in revenue from state and income taxes for all of these individual states. So essentially, I could see the attractiveness of offering that extra $600, at least for the state of California. But then you always have to think about, well, how are we going to make up for that in the budget later? And how might that manifest? Does that show up in the form of cuts to services in the future? Does that show up in the form of higher taxes? So we'll just have to see how that rolls out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We'll have to see how that rolls out. And I agree with you, Darla. I mean, in fact, it's interesting because that announcement was made, and then there was another announcement. It almost seemed like it happened at the same time, but then they also said they were actually increasing taxes for those millionaire plus citizens in California to I think it was 54%. Right. So, or I don't know if it's right, but I think it was around that area. But taxes are certainly going up. And I think that's sort of something we should expect. I mean, given how much we're spending on this pandemic, we know money doesn't grow on trees. And therefore, we should probably expect at some point taxes to go up. And that's just a reality. We'll just have to make the best of it. There's really no choice. We got to get through this together. Let's talk about something that I thought was so interesting. So you had an article talking about Americans utilizing distributions from their 401k plan. And this article, Darla, I got to tell you, I was really eye-opening for me as a financial advisor because, we do know, maybe you could talk a little bit about the CARES Act and IRA distributions for those who maybe don't have that background on that. Do you mind sharing that?
Absolutely. So one of the provisions in the CARES Act allowed retirement savers to withdraw up to $100,000 from their 401k or from their IRA, and do so without the 10% early withdrawal penalty that applies for folks who are under age 59 and a half. You are still on the hook for the income taxes that would arise from that withdrawal, but have the option of you can spread the tax over the course of 3 years, which might make it easier to plan for paying that out. And then also, if you were to go and basically repay the money, put the money back into the account and do so before those 3 years, you can file an amended return and basically undo the withdrawal on your taxes. You would have to file an amended return to do that. Yes.
amended return, right? So you probably it's probably a good thing to do with your accountant or some tax specialist to help you with that. Darla, it's interesting because I remember when that was announced by the CARES Act, a lot of our clients actually reached out and said, do you think this is a good idea? And we did have, I think, a couple clients actually initiate that distribution, but it was a smaller percent, a very small percent, because I think that there was a lot of wait and hold, at least with our clients. So when you wrote this article, I don't know if it surprised you. When I read your article, I was surprised that the numbers showed that quite a lot of Americans actually took the full amount. I wasn't surprised that they took a distribution, but I was surprised that they took the entire 100,000 right off the back. Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, that was pretty counterintuitive. I definitely did not expect that. And I guess just to pull some stats, so at Fidelity, about 3% of the company's eligible 401k and 403b plan participants CARES distribution. When you look at the full number, though, it's 711,000 people. So
that's a lot, almost 750,000 people.
Yeah. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we're not necessarily sure what drives folks to do that. And certainly, I feel like the rule of thumb has always been, this is the funding of last resort, because, if you're doing that, you're taking money out of the market. You're doing so at a time when, we've got a whole lot of volatility going on. And then you're inviting this, we don't know how things will fare in the future. So, are you going to have a hard time paying that tax bill next year, for instance? Are you going to have a hard time putting the money back in? Because we don't know how long this pandemic-fueled recession might last. So
right.
You bring a lot of uncertainty when you do this.
Right. I mean, I think, Darla, that's what I was most surprised by, because I think there's sort of two categories. You have people who are concerned. They feel like they're concerned about how they're going to make their payments next month. And so they would take a distribution. But surprising that they would take the full 100,000 all at once, because like you mentioned, this is really an area that should be considered a last resort, because you are taking from your future retirement needs, right? And for many Americans, the 401k is that biggest pie of retirement savings. And I know, Darla, you and I both know that most people who take from their 401k never pay themselves back. That money just, they just don't have the ability to pay themselves back. So I know there was a lot of concern from the financial advisor community that this occurred. We're glad that they have that sort of lifeline to be able to take from, but it's concerning that they took out so much. It would have been better, I think, if they took out how much they needed periodically and just assessed, right? So hopefully, those who actually did take so much out will then slowly start to pay some of that back. That would be ideal. But yeah, that's a lot of people. So you wonder if, number one, if they're going to pay themselves back. And number two, you wonder if they had any, a professional help them, sort of guide them through that process. And so I guess only time will tell, right? Time will tell. Let's move to an area I know many of you who are tuning in, and I see Jim from Chicago. I know many of you have really all eyes on this, because many of you are business owners, right? Or maybe you're sole practitioners, or you run a small business, or maybe you run a very large business. The topic of the PPP, Darla, I know this is something that you've written a lot extensively about. A lot of business owners right now are suffering. We certainly know that in the hospitality space, restaurants, travel, and so many other areas where it just isn't conducive to business, because a lot of Americans aren't traveling as much anymore, right? And we're not eating in restaurants as much anymore. So this next round of stimulus, what are you hearing do you think that we're going to have another round of PPP?
Well, just to look at what's going on over here with the HEALS Act, which I guess, first of all, I should say, but there is still money left in the PPP as it stands. The issue that's being discussed, though, currently is part of HEALS. And bear in mind that that's just, it's proposed, it's not law just yet. But they're talking about giving folks a second shot at the PPP loan. So these would be individuals who you took a loan the first go around. You've run out of your funding, or you're close to it. And in this case, they've narrowed down the number of eligible firms such that they're looking to target the relief toward folks who have no more than 300 employees, and then a 50% reduction in gross receipts in the first or second quarter of this year versus the last. So basically, we're talking about firms that were particularly hit hard, and potentially giving them the opportunity to go back and borrow a second lifeline.
Right. I've talked to a number of business owners, and they said, their first round of PPP, they spent that in very quickly for payroll, as well as paying for rent for their restaurant. And actually, it's interesting. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation. An immigration attorney who was literally making healthy six figures in 2019 right now, just put in a request to get out of his business office space. As of August 1st, he can no longer make rent. And certainly, sometimes we forget just how broad that is, because, the immigration courts aren't open. He can't represent clients. So he's shut down. And I actually also spoke with someone who was involved with the prom and bridal space, and clothing space, and they went bankruptcy last month. So I think what we're seeing is that there's just a lot of need, right, for business owners, because if you don't provide that relief, then they can't maintain payroll, which is almost a trickle down effect. So I'm glad to see that is being reproposed. Like Darla said, it's being proposed. We don't know for sure if it's going to happen, but I think there needs to be that continuation of these discussions to make sure that everybody is in a better situation. I mean, Darla, I know this is just asking your opinion, but I'll tell you how I feel. I feel like, it's either the right hand or the left hand. If we don't give to businesses to pay their payroll, then they're not going to make payroll, and those people are going to be on unemployment.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly it.
Right. So you have to somehow support. If you don't pay for the unemployment, or maybe enhancement of unemployment, they can't spend money at the supermarket and buy things, right? Which is necessary to keep businesses afloat. So it's really sort of a cycle, right, Darla?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just in my mind. I just think sometimes we get so stuck in one area. We sometimes have to sit back and realize that nobody chose to be in a pandemic, but we just sort of have to make the best of it. And I think it's going to be very costly.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I would say, if anything, that this pandemic has just really brought to the fore how we're all connected to one another. And the fact that, you've got this issue going on with these small businesses. Well, if the small business isn't functioning, they can't keep their people employed. If those people are unemployed, and if the business ends up closing down, ultimately, you're going to have an effect on, states and municipalities as well. They're going to miss out on all of that additional revenue coming from, either in the form of those income taxes, those sales taxes as well. We're all interdependent on each other. So,
right.
Yeah,
I love that, what you said. We are all dependent on one another. And there was actually, I saw this, and they said, Mark Cuban had made the comment saying that businesses should absolutely not take the PPP loan. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? So many businesses are struggling, and they're worried about how they're going to take care of their employees and themselves and still stay safe. And yet, I don't think businesses should feel ashamed for having to take this relief, because it's there for a reason, because Americans have to look out for each other, and we want to continue to take care of one another in the most proactive way. So certainly, I actually do expect there to be another round of PPP. I think that's going to be necessary. But like you said, how and what that looks like is going to be I think it's going to be very different than when